morning. Good morning. Welcome in. Boy, we went hardcore SEC football the last 30 minutes on the show. You can tell we're kind of turning the page after this whole Mississippi State National Championship baseball run and a couple other topics, and really locking into some college football and SEC football. That was a fun discussion on the cocktail party. And I say it all the time. If you get a chance to go to Georgia, Florida, go. It's wild. And I had pretty low expectations because it's not a game on campus, and I was wrong. They're able to bring it to that Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium, and the tailgating and everything. The party is wide open. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Brought to you by Havana Smoke Shop, 2 locations in the Jackson Metro, I-55 North Frontage Road. And then, of course, right across from Shaggy's at the Reservoir. So Rocky Patel's, La Florida Dominicanas, H. Upman's, Monte Cristo's, Oliva's, you name it. They've got a great selection of premium cigars at Havana Smoke Shop. Want to welcome in our friend Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst and Recruiting Analyst with ESPN. He joins us on the Modelo guest line. Lugs, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. Can we just get back to calling it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party? Like, why is everybody so offended by that? Why did we have to change the name of what is one of the greatest rivalries in college football that's played in the middle of the year? And let's just call it what it is, right?
That's how we reference it, my man. We never change.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
I will say this, Lugs. I know you've been to great game. Well, and you're working, but you still experience the fans and the stadium atmosphere and all of that. We get to really socialize on Saturday. But having been to the cocktail party, it blew me away because I was kind of looking down at it. I was kind of a snob about it. And I thought, they're not going to be able to create this magic on a neutral field, even though those two get after it. And, man, I went, whatever it was, 3 years ago. And I was like, holy smokes, this is insane. And it's a lot of fun, Luke. It really is. They do a good job.
It is. And that's what it's meant to be. I've never understood the whole push for, well, we can't offend this group or that group or whatever it is because we got to change the name of something that is just meant to be fun.
Well, and they get out. Look, Friday night is wild down there.
Oh, yeah.
And then Saturday, you got to get down. They always, this, they're always the 2:30 game. So you got to get down there again early on Saturday morning, maybe 10 or 11. Because and I didn't know that they had their own parking lots. So, this parking lot's Georgia, this parking lot's Florida, this parking lot's Georgia. And to me, that is cool. You'll see a sea of red and blue in one parking lot. I'm not red and blue, of black and red, and then you'll see a sea of blue and orange in the next parking lot. And I think that's what makes it. And literally the stadium is split half and half.
It's like a bowl game.
It is. It is, except it's packed. And so anyway, all right, so I was reminiscing about that. I do want to throw something out at you. I read an article over the weekend, and I thought about what you said to us, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or so. It could have been longer, whatever. I was reading an article by Antonio Morales and Bruce Feldman on The Athletic about Pac-12 recruiting, football recruiting.
Okay.
And you mentioned this a few years ago, but this really jumped out at me.
All right.
They were talking about, what's happening in the Pac-12, how they're falling behind, what does Southern Cal do? They interviewed like 9 high school coaches in the LA metro area. What what is Southern Cal's approach, UCLA's approach, Arizona State's, Oregon's, blah blah blah. All right, but here's what jumped out at me. Nearly 14,000 fewer California students played high school football in 2019 compared to 2014, Tom Luginbill. And as the national recruiting analyst for ESPN and somebody who has tracked players for years, you can't overcome that, Tom. You can't.
Well, you can't overcome it, too, and I'm constantly being accused of having an East Coast bias and all this and that, and people who actually know me realize that I was born and raised on the West Coast. I was the son of a coach that coached in the Pac-8 before it was the Pac-10. the old WAC, which is now the Mountain West, my entire life. And so what I always tell people is just look at the numbers. All you have to do is look at the numbers, because I get in the debate with people that Georgia is actually a better high school football state than the state of California. And people want to bark back, that's impossible. California has 38 million people. Doesn't matter that they have 38 million people. They don't have a football playing population. You've got to understand, if you look at the U.S. national consensus, every 4 years it comes out and they do demographics on ethnic backgrounds and groups that make up the percentage of your 38 million people in California. Well, close to 60% of that is Hispanic or Asian, all right? Those two groups, for whatever reason, are not football playing groups. So you don't have really 38 million people that you're counting as a football playing population. You add to that what you just mentioned, a decrease in participation in the sport of football in the state of California. And now it really magnifies the actual number that is playing. Now, I could take that a couple of steps further. Number one, if we wanted to look at the state of California the way we look at Florida, all right, so you've got the state of California, and it borders on what? Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, Utah, then you've got New Mexico, you've got Wyoming, you've got Idaho, you've got Washington, you've got all these bordering states. Florida, you've got South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, all right? Here's the difference. If in the state of California there is a really, really good player, and let's just say USC loses out on that player, they can't go into Arizona, Oregon, Nevada, New Mexico, and replace that same player with the same caliber of talent. Whereas if I'm a Miami or a Florida State or a University of Florida and I lose out on a great player in my state, I can go replace that player with the same caliber of talent by going into Georgia, going into Alabama, going into Mississippi, going into Louisiana. So there's a variety of reasons as to why the Pac-12 has struggled. It is player-related. Most predominantly, it is trench player-related. I can't tell you how many West Coast camps I've been to over the last 5 years, high-profile invite camps, where you go to these camps and you look at the offensive and defensive linemen that are attending, and then you go to a camp in Dallas or Atlanta or Orlando, and it's like apples and oranges. You can't even compare the two.
And they talk about that here. You know, they and again, for our listeners, and Luginbill mentioned this several years ago on the show, nearly 14,000 fewer California students played high school football in 2019 compared to 2014. They'll never make that up. All right, I had a friend run into a Pac-12 assistant coach in a Denver airport a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said, we'll never close the gap.
No,
and after the show, I'll tell you you'll know exactly who it is. But he told a buddy of mine, he said, look, can we get good players? Sure. Is there speed out here? Quarterbacks are trained well, refined and advanced here and there. Yeah. He said, everybody out here wants to be a wide receiver. And he said, he said, even guys who were 6'4", 260. But he said, what has happened the last few years is the SEC, and a little bit of, well, that's so top heavy. But the bottom line is, he said they will not close the gap. Do you agree or disagree, Luke?
Yeah, I do agree. And a lot of this too has to do with perception. All right. Think of the age group that we are talking about. Let's take a kid that's in the 2022 class. He's in the state of California. All right. And let's back up 10 years. So from the time he was 7 years old to now 17, who has he identified with in major college football as championship caliber teams?
Bama, Clemson, Ohio State.
That's right. It's not USC. It's not UCLA. It's not Washington. It's not Oregon. It's not Texas. All right. It's Oklahoma to some degree. So when you look and you see a Spencer Rattler from Arizona goes to Oklahoma, didn't go to USC. All right. You see a DJ Uiagalelei. You see a Tua Tagovailoa. You see a Najee Harris. All right, these are all California or Hawaii kids, Arizona kids. But what they've identified with, and I've always said this, recruiting is 9/10 perception. All right, how are you perceived as a program in the prospect's eyes? And if they're going to be a high-profile player, so for example, let's take Kayvon Thibodeau. All right, 10 years ago, a Kayvon Thibodeau would have never, ever not signed with USC, ever. That wouldn't have happened. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with old Pac-10 coaches, Mike Bellotti, my dad, the late Terry Donahue. Whereas when there was a great player in the state of California, and the whole league knew it, that was USC's player, and you had to go get somebody else. That's just how it was. But that's not how USC is identified with anymore amongst top-level players. So when a Clemson, and an Alabama, or an A&M, or an Oklahoma can go into the West Coast and take your best players, you're not overcoming that. And the only way you overcome that is by somehow closing the gap, somehow becoming a national power again, so that you shift the perception back to your hometown teams.
Tom Luginbill on the Modelo guest line. Another one locally, Matt Corral from the West Coast.
Yep.
Think if
Christian High School.
Yes. Think if you dropped him in the Pac-12, he would obviously have – I mean, if he had some good coaches on the offensive side of the football, if you dropped him in the Pac-12 without the monsters as edge rushers and the unbelievable corners at 6'1", who are so long and rangy, can you imagine, Luke's?
You know what? He'd make teams better, but he wouldn't make them championship caliber teams because the people playing up front in that league aren't good enough.
Yeah.
The quarterback, the assistant coach you referenced, he's 100% right. You're going to have well-trained quarterbacks if you can get them to stay. You're going to have tremendous skill. If you look across the Pac-12, top to bottom, I mean, their wideouts, their slots, their running backs can play with anybody across the country. What they have such a deficiency up front, and see that's where Oklahoma has made a huge surge under Alex Grinch's leadership. They have vastly improved their talent pool in the defensive front seven. And if you look at them a year ago, everybody talks about their offense. It's the defense that's going to get them to winning a college football playoff game and getting into a national championship.
Yes.
That's where they've closed the gap.
And I think and by the way, Oklahoma stole Alex Grinch from Mike Leach. Know, people talk about how Leach doesn't he's had several like that have gone on to have really big career. And now Zach Arnett from San Diego State. Rocky Long's a heck of a defensive coach out west. Now you look at what he did last year at MSU. He's not but like 33, 34. He's another one that's going to get a big-time job. So back let me read what one of the high school coaches said about Chip Kelly in UCLA. He said, they blank. The thing that kills me about UCLA, I understand they're thorough in their recruiting, but they act like they have a stable full of horses. They need all the kids they can get. They wait for this was a common theme throughout the article, by the way, this next sentence. They wait forever to offer kids and recruit them. They need to get on it because they're taking their sweet time recruiting, and they don't have that luxury. Your thoughts, Tom?
100% true, although I don't disagree with it. I think what Chip Kelly is trying to do is he is trying to be thorough. He is trying to identify. He is trying to the best of their ability to eliminate red flags so that you hope to do one thing. At the end of the day, everybody's hoping to do one thing, not miss. All right? And it's admirable. I totally agree with the process. It's how it should be. He's trying to go back to the way it used to be. The problem is I don't know if you can afford to do that in this day and age. I don't know if the kid and how they perceive you, if you're going to be in on a kid, you can't offer him at the end of his junior year when your other competitors in the conference and maybe 10 other schools offered him in the middle of his sophomore year. It's such a huge mountain to overcome. Again, I don't disagree with that. I think Chip Kelly is right in his assessment of what he's trying to do. I just don't know. And I said this when he took the job because I remember that first recruiting cycle, and they were nowhere to be seen. Nowhere to be seen. I mean,
they finished like 75th or something.
Oh, Yeah, and they weren't on guys. They weren't targeting guys. Some of the guys they were taking just flat out weren't good enough. And I knew what he was doing. And again, I agree with it. I just don't know if it's possible, especially to get to the caliber of player that you have to compete for a championship in any league.
Mm-hmm. We're visiting with Tom Luginbill, head of recruiting, ESPN, National College Football Analyst. He joins us on the Modelo guest line. We're referencing an article on theathletic.com, and they're talking about recruiting out west. And can Southern Cal get their act together? Can UCLA? We all think Oregon is close. Obviously, and Tom knows this, they're spending a lot of manpower in the LA metro area.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue they're right there with Southern Cal and smoking UCLA, and then some other things. One coach on here, Tom, said, we don't have enough guys out here with dog in them. They're not willing to do what it takes to play in the trenches. And look, there's different eating habits. I mean, more people are eating salads and sushi. Here, we're all about blue plates today. Up in the Big Ten, as you know, that footprint. I mean, it's all about thick soup and pork chops and veggies. Same thing down here. So, and he talks about that. He said the diet is different, but we don't have enough dudes with dog in them. How do you see it?
I totally agree. I would dare to use the phrase pampered. I think a lot of people have used the phrase soft in relationship to the problem with the game of football is the game of football is hard, all right? And in so many different ways, a lot of it has to do with player safety. I get that. We've taken the hard out of it and created an easy path, right? You know, for example, and this wasn't that long ago, when I was playing college football, you know, you got water breaks when they blew the whistle and said it was a water break. You know, you knew the difference between being hurt and injured. The grind, what they asked you to do in the weight room and in the off season would just bring you to your knees. Well, we've taken away. I mean, you can't do 2-a-days anymore. Remember, we used to all have Hell Week.
Oh yeah,
it would actually go for 2 weeks. And then I remember being at Georgia Tech, my fall camp. We had 3-a-days. I mean, it was an absolute grind. Kids aren't willing to do that anymore. We've removed that because, number one, everything, you know, everybody's so paranoid about this or that, and I think we've taken a lot of the toughness out of the game. Well, when you do that, then nobody wants to embrace the hard. Nobody wants to embrace the difficult. And I think you got to respect a guy like Nick Saban and his staff for being able to, in this day and age, in our society right now, still get a lot of out of kids that know if they sign there, it's not going to be easy.
Right.
You are going to be challenged, and you might fail. And how you respond to that is, and again, it's not just about football. It's in life. I mean, it's one of the greatest team building experiences for life lessons, for the choices that you make and the sacrifices that you make. That's what makes football so remarkable. But I think especially on the West Coast, let's not forget, there's a lot to do, man. You can be surfing, skiing.
Sure.
You're out on the beach. There's a lot of things that kids would rather do than wake up at 5 a.m. and go play high school football when it's 80 degrees outside and the coach is grinding on you.
Right.
And I think a lot of that has to do with upbringing too. I mean, it's a different era than it used to be.
Well, it's funny you talk about that. This guy, one of the coaches here, one of the high school coaches from the Los Angeles metro area, referenced the commitment to strength and conditioning. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, he said it's just not the same. This guy said, our kids, the hunger's not there.
There you go.
And, I mean, that's a coach, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure he loves his players, and he loves to compete and loves living out there. You know this. It's a wonderful place to live. Great weather, all that.
Not anymore.
Well, that's changed.
I don't even recognize
Yeah.
my former home state. Holy smokes.
But and he talks about how so many of the kids out there are super health conscious, which is good if you're a golfer, tennis, basketball, baseball, whatever. I mean, I get it, but you just got to have enough in the trenches. And I wonder, like Mario Cristobal, Luke's, he's running an SEC program at Oregon as much as he can. I get it. He's been under Saban, among others. But at the end of the day, how many can you really poach from Texas and Florida and some other spots? And LA, even LA Metro. And then on top of all, or does he have to move eventually? If he is good enough, we'll see what happens next couple of years. Or does he eventually have to move east of the Mississippi River?
Well, they can be good enough because they cast a wide net. They've got great branding. All right. They're attractive on a national stage. They can be good enough to win the Pac-12 every year. The question is that good enough to get one of the 4 slots? And if you did get one of the 4 slots, would you end up being no different than Oklahoma has been when they've gotten in it, where you get blasted in the first round because you play somebody that just overwhelms you at key spots, offensive line, defensive line, those sorts of things. So in order to actually have a chance to win the national championship, there's no question he'd have to go east of the Mississippi. But in order to get one of those jobs, he needs to win the Pac-12. They need to, because at some point or another, I personally happen to think that he will be in the running for the Alabama job when Nick Saban decides to, finally hang it up. But he's gonna have to continue to win at a high level,
right,
to be considered in that regard.
Interesting. And of course, you probably can't say this, but I think Southern Cal's got to move off Clay Helton. I mean, they need a big boy coach. Chip is interesting to me. I know how innovative he is.
Yeah.
But that was really innovative 10, 11 years ago. Today, a lot of people are doing what he was doing at Oregon,
Yeah, I tell you, I think, though, where he excels, I think he's the best in-game coach in the Pac-12. He might be one of the best in-game adjustments, play calls, management. That is where he is really, really good. And I think he's so good in that area that he can overcome a few of their talent deficiencies. But obviously, not the X's and the O's, it's the Jimmys and the Joes.
Right. Maybe you can get away with some of that out there because of what we just talked about for 20 minutes that you couldn't in the SEC.
Yeah. I mean, if you get a quarterback and some skill,
right,
you've got a chance to improve dramatically. I mean, that's what Arizona State's been able to do. That's
right.
Oregon has done that. I mean, even teams like Washington or Washington State under Mike Leach, you get some skill guys and a quarterback, you got a chance.
No doubt. All right. Well, and it'll be interesting to see. Does LSU go out there and beat them by 30, or can Chip make it interesting? Because we know, LSU has 10 times more talent. Anyway, we have time to get into that. Lugs, thank you, buddy. Have a good week.
All right, buddy. You too.
Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. He joined us on the Modelo guest line. Grab a 6-pack of Modelo. Enjoy one on the back porch late this afternoon with a lime. Please drink responsibly. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. The show is brought to you by Havana Smoke Shop with 2 locations, I-55 North Frontage Road and across from Shaggy's at the Reservoir. Back in a second.